Welcome back to the Aerodrome Scale Models. Today, I will be building the Tamiya Birdcage Corsair in 1/48 scale. I had a lot of fun with this build and was able to try some new techniques and aftermarket upgrades. Let's get started. For the cockpit, I had a Quinta Studio 3D decal set to use. I have never used 3D decals before, but I've wanted to, and out of the box, these Quinta Studio decals look amazing. In order to use them, I will have to remove the kit supply details. To do this, I used a combination of a flat-bladed knife, regular cutters, and sandpaper to get the surfaces smooth. Some details need to be retained, so I carefully left those parts alone. After cleaning and priming the cockpit with Mr. Surfacer Gray 1000, I began airbrushing with Ammo MIG's Interior Green. In Rivet Counter Guide Number 1, Corsair Cockpits, author Dana Bell shows that the Corsair cockpit was mostly interior green, with the subassemblies like the seat, joystick, and rudder pedals being painted dull dark green. I didn't have any of the darker green, so I painted the whole cockpit with interior green. In future builds, I will use dull dark green on the appropriate parts. For simulated wear on the cockpit seat, which is a good focal point, I first used a lighter green for chips and scratches. Using watercolor pencils, I added chipping on panel edges and raised details. The pencils worked well in the cockpit. I also did some dry brushing of lighter green tones on the armor plating behind the seat before highlighting with pencils again. I was able to experiment at this stage while trying not to overdo the weathering. The watercolor pencils definitely work best on bare paint with no clear coats. I focused on some edges and places I thought would get worn the most. The Corsair was atypical in that it did not have a traditional cockpit floor. Pilots would rest their feet on this channel of sorts, which lined up with the rudder pedals. I painted some of the kit details in the cockpit NATO black. The joystick assembly slots in easily to the rudder pedals. I started with the Quinta Studio seatbelts. Per the instructions, I did use a little PVA glue to help with adhesion. I was immediately impressed just with the seatbelts, how much detail they had. The lap belts did take some work in getting to lay down properly, and next time I would probably do these belts in a different order, but the result was worth the effort. I was looking forward to the instrument panel decals, and they did not disappoint. Working with the decals was not too difficult. They are thick, and I took care not to damage them, but they are pretty durable. It's amazing the instant level of high-quality detail they provide, something I would never be able to achieve on my own with the kit details. Besides the side panel decals, this section also included a fair number of smaller decals that really enhanced some finer aspects of the cockpit. The two halves of the cockpit fit together easily. I am really happy with how the cockpit came together and couldn't wait to get this installed in the fuselage. The Quinta Studio's decal set also includes some transfers for the sidewalls of the fuselage, which had to be finished up before installing the cockpit. The completed cockpit slots nicely into the fuselage. The armor plating needs to fit into the upper portion of the fuselage, which is how I checked the alignment of the cockpit tub. There isn't really any other locating tabs to guide the cockpit into its proper place. After some dry fitting, I carefully fitted the fuselage together. Overall, the fit was solid, and I was able to avoid major seam gaps, although the nose has a prominent seam line that needed to be dealt with. I focused on getting the cockpit fitted correctly, which helped get the rest of the fuselage in its proper place. The development of the Corsair started in 1938, several years before the United States would enter World War II. Prototype models reached speeds over 400 miles per hour, faster than European-based frontline fighters during the early 40s. Initial Corsair canopies with their many glass frames were called birdcages, which is where the moniker Birdcage Corsair derived from. As early as September 1942, the Navy determined poor visibility from the Corsair would require a cockpit modification. The earliest model Corsairs have a straight canopy as seen here, but the first modified Corsairs had the stopgap blown canopy with a blister to accommodate a change to the seat height. The main goal was to make deflection shooting easier, an impossibility if the enemy fighter was hidden entirely behind the Corsair's nose. 949 Birdcage Corsairs would be delivered to the U.S. Navy. The bubble canopy, as seen on the D model Corsair, would be the final result of such modifications. Next up was assembling, painting, and installing the engine. I stuck with the out-of-the-box kit parts here. After priming in Mr. Surfacer Gray, I airbrushed the engine NATO Black, which gives it a nice subdued color, a few shades lighter than straight flat black and looks more realistic. With some acrylic paints, I added some details. It's not much, but with the massive propeller that will be fitted at the end, plus considering how the engine is sunk back into the cowling, just a little detail goes a long way. The real-life Corsair, of course, had a gigantic 13-foot prop attached to the equally monstrous R2800 Pratt & Whitney radial engine, churning out an astonishing 2,000 horsepower. I added a quick wash to bring out some depth before finishing the assembly. The inside of the cowling was airbrushed interior green before assembly. The kit includes this clear panel to simulate the real glass found on Corsairs. As far as I know, this piece was universally painted over on frontline Corsairs. The bottom section of the fuselage is a nice touch as it was visible for the pilots when flying, but it can't really be seen on the finished model. A downside to lacking a traditional floor was aggressive maneuvers, particularly going inverted or any time the pilot rolled the Corsair. Dust, dirt, sand, lost gear, and even forgotten tools would be thrown into the cockpit. The gear bays are the simplest I've ever assembled, with just a single piece that needs to be installed on each side. Because the kit offers the option of raised or extended wings, the base of the wings is built separately and joined to the bottom of the fuselage. I found this made assembly easier, although care had to be taken when installing the outer portion of the wings. Some newer Corsair kits offer two completely different sets of wings with their own installation. Finally, I installed the finished cowling assembly. With the base assembly completed, I could now start on the outer wings. Since I am building a Marine Corsair, having the wings extended is a given. Marine Corsairs almost never folded their wings. and eventually many of them had their hydraulic lines drained and locking pins secured in the wings, which prevented the wings from being able to be folded all together. The locating pins are decent enough for the outer wings. I did have to tape them together to allow the glue to set properly. The instructions call for this piece to be mounted to the other side of the wing base, which would probably give a better and more secure connection. The joint worked out for me in the end, but I would recommend doing it how the instructions are written. The Corsair's unique gull wings came about for a variety of reasons. During initial design, the landing gear was very long to give ground clearance to the planned 13-foot propeller. This did not suit the Navy demands for a carrier fighter, which would be asked to handle the shock of carrier landings. A gull wing would shorten the landing gear strut, which was further modified by a telescoping design. Vought engineers also discovered that joining the main spar at a right angle gave the strongest joint, so the gull wing accomplished that as well. This glass piece reportedly broke on many Corsairs and was often removed, but I included it anyway. After working on the seam line on the nose and masking the canopy, this Corsair was ready for some paint. I primed the model in Mr. Surfacer Gray before starting the first layer of AK Light Blue. I struggled at first to thin this paint correctly, and my early coats often were too watery. At other times, the paint would be much lighter than when I had started and dry a white-blue color, which had to be redone. Eventually, I got the fuselage to the color I wanted. After I got the AK light blue where I wanted it, I had to mask and paint the bottom surfaces. I used MRP White as I think it is the easiest white to use and works well. I also had to build up the layers here, but was able to get some nice tonal variation. Corsairs maintained this two-tone scheme while in Marine service, which often faded quickly in the harsh conditions of the South Pacific. By late '43 and spring of '44, 3 color schemes started making their way to frontline squadrons. Some of the flaps were blue on both sides, while others were half blue and half white. I thought the flaps lacked authority and were kind of finicky, but with some work they settled in. The kit includes some stencils in addition to the main identification markings. After finishing all the decals and letting them dry with some Mark Fit Strong, I clear-coated the model again and started on panel lining. Once the panel liner has dried, I come back with a Q-tip dipped in mineral spirits and clean up the excess liner. I have to be careful to not soak the Q-tip, as too much mineral spirit would run into the panel line and remove all of the liner. I used a light green watercolor pencil to simulate paint wearing through to the primer. This step added some visual interest, but was difficult to do on a gloss coat. In the future, I will try to do this step following a flat or matte clear coat. After doing some chipping with a small brush and some silver paint, I airbrushed Tamiya smoke to simulate exhaust stains, gun smoke, and various discolored spots that seemed commonplace on many Corsairs. I used some oil paints for dirt and grime along the bottom of the Corsair. It's not perfect, but I learned a lot and am improving with oils. I went a little too far with some of the weathering, but I was able to dial it back, and I'm very happy with how the Corsair turned out. I painted and installed the landing gears, then sealed all my work in with a flat coat to finish the build. The Corsair represented in this build flew with VMF 213, the Hellhawks. Unfortunately, this Corsair was lost along with its pilot, Captain Foy Garrison, on July 17, 1943, after being shot down by Japanese Zeros while on an escort mission.